Pretty sad symbol.
Lolling.
Okay. Good morning. We're learning as Chutz for Shlema Filan Chaya Basarach on the top of Lamed Tes Amid Aleph, top line. Amar Rab, Shma Mina, Kesher Elyon Deraisa. We see from this that the Kesher Elyon, which Rashi says Kesher Elyon, Hainami Hahu Kesher Lamata. It doesn't really mean Bedavka, one specific Kesher over the others. Any one of them. So let's remind ourselves exactly what a tzitzis consists of. It's 4 strings, normally 2 tcheles and 2 lavan, according to Rashi, Taisus. And what you do is you loop it through the tzitzis, through the beged, and you make. The Gemara will sometimes call the strings the tcheles, or the tzitzis, and you knot it. And he's saying that the requirement to have that one knot is deraisa, whether it's the beginning or the end. It means, he says, Rashi understands elyon to mean the last knot, the one closest to the actual strings, where the strings are loose. But he said it doesn't make a difference. The point is, one midaraisa, you need to have one knot. But what we normally do is we have a knot, then we take one string and we wrap it around, like we'll see, at least a minimum of 3 times around the strings. And you make another knot, and you do that however many times. We do it, I think, 4 or 5 times, but the Gemara will say different shitas. But that's the general setup of the tzitzis. But what we're saying now is that one of those knots that you have in between the braids, what the Gemara calls the braids, the chulias, well, are those different, the areas between the knots that we have the string going around the other string, the looped string around it. In any case, kasher elyon deraisa, a single kasher is midaraisa. If you'll say it's only midarabanan that we're required to make a knot, and really, the strings, the tchelis and with the lavan could just be flying loosely. They could just go through your baguette and just be flying around without any knots. If that's the case, why does the Torah have to tell you that you can even have a linen baguette with woolen? We have a drasha that tells you that you could do a linen baguette together with woolen tzitzis. There's no chi of shatnez. There's an exclusion of, we exclude the din of shatnez, the isser of shatnez, by tzitzis. Pshita. If someone who just makes one, let's say sews one stitch, it means before they actually stitch it together, they just pass it through one time. That's not considered to be a chibur. And similarly, if you just put the string through the baguette and you leave it loose without knotting it, it's not considered to be mechuber to the baguette, and you wouldn't have a problem of shatnez. That means that this is the analysis. The Torah says there's no problem of shatnez when you have tzitzis made out of tzemer and the baguette is made out of linen, even though normally that would be shatnez. But the Gemara asks, if there's no requirement to knot the tzitzis, it's anyway not a shatnez problem, because if you just make one tekifa, this is similar to having one tekifa, you just have it go through the whole one time, but it's not knotted at all. It's not considered to be shatnez anyway. The two things are not considered to be connected. Al shma mina deraisa, from the fact that the Torah has to be mater shatnez by tzitzis, it must be that midaraisa, or at least halacha l'maish misina, you need a knot. Amar Rabba Babar Ada, Amar Rav Ada, Amar Rav. Im nifsak hachut me ikroi psula. If the string is cut off, that is, it's knotted and it's all being held in place, but if it gets cut off right by the hole in the baguette, it's pasul. Yazar Rav Nachman v'Kamalah Shmaitz. Rav Nachman was saying this over this dim b'shem Rav, that if it's cut off at the beginning, it's pasul. Esvei Rava Rav Nachman. Rava asked Rav Nachman, when do we say that you have to have the four tzitzis, the four strings. That's when you're first making the tzitzis. But after you already made the tzitzis, and now there's something tore, shiur of vergadum of kolshu, any amount of shiur of our leftovers, giduma of our pieces left, it's going to be kosher. My shira of my gerduma. What are the two things that we say? That if there's something left over, and if there is a piece left over, it's going to be kosher. My love shira of the ifsik minayu v'ishtayu minayu. If shira means where it got cut off, but not right by the hole in the baguette, but it's a little bit off of that, so there's a little bit left. Geduma of the igedumi, and geduma, to tell you the chiddush, even if it's cut off right by the hole, that there's nothing left, that there's no piece of string hanging out of the hole. So you see that even if it's cut with nothing left, which was we said it's puzzle. We're saying on both of them, both with shira, where there's a little bit left, and geduma, where there's nothing left, it's going to be kosher. As long as it's not mitchilase, as long as it wasn't made like that, as long as it was originally made properly, even if it's cut off that there's nothing left, it's still kosher. Sakamar loy chadik tani shiurai geduma kolshu. It means if you left over, which means geduma kolshu. If you left over, it's expressing the same thing. Shiuroi and geduma kolshu. Either one of them, as long as there's something left, kolshu, it's going to be kosher. Geduma is not expressing a different concept. Saying the same thing of shiur, something was left over. So if that's the case, if a geduma means
that would be, and therefore.
That's the reason why it's kosher, because there's something left. But Ein Chanami, it's true, Nifsach Chut Me'ikre, that there's nothing left, would be possible. We were saying originally, since there's two Lashonis, it's mashma, one of them means something different. One means that there's a little bit left, the other one means there's nothing left. We're saying, no, they both mean that there's a little bit left. So if Gerdumav means there's a little bit left, Lemer Gerdumav, which is the more likely lashon to mean nothing, but we're saying it means there's something left. Shiur of Lamali, what do we have to say? The second lashon of Shiur. So we need, like we said in the previous Amud, that it doesn't mean a kol shehu. It means really that you have to have enough that you could tie it into a little bit of a knot. It doesn't mean a tiny bit, a quarter, a tenth of an inch. It has to be enough that it could be tied. Yosef Rabba Kama Mishmei de Rab. Rabba said B'Shem Rab. Chut shel kerach. If you ever, I don't know if anyone ever undid a tzitzis, but there's four strings. One of them is much, much longer than the others, and that's the one, use a single one to go all the way around all the others. It's the same one on each one of the chulyas. So the Gemara is saying that don't think that one that goes around is not included as the tzitzis. Even though it's going around the others, it's still counted as part of the tzitzis, as part of the four strings. Amar Rabbi Yosef Shmuel Amra B'loi Rav. He says that this was b'shem Shmuel, it wasn't b'shem Rav. Emanami Am Barchana Sachli Rabbi Yoshia de Menusha, and the Shita says, adds in Mishmei Shmuel. He also said b'shem Shmuel that string is counted as part of the count of four strings. Yosef Rav v'ka'ama Mishmei de Shmuel. Tcheles shekarach ruba kshera. A tcheles, in this case, tcheles doesn't mean bedafka. I think blue as opposed to love, and it just means the strings that. So if you made 2/3 of it to be the part that are what we call the chulyas, the knots with the chulyas, and then you left 1/3 of it as hanging strings, which is obviously very different than we have, right? We have just a little bit of tied strings of the tied part, and then our strings, our freely flying strings, are much bigger. He's saying even if it's roiv, if roiv of it is the tied part, with the chulius, it's still kosher. As we're going to see, that's not the ideal, but it's still kosher. Amr Rav Yosef, Rav Amr V'lo Shmuel. He said also on this that Rav said it and not Shmuel. If Manami Amr Rav Huna, before we said Shmuel Amr V'lo Rav, now we're saying Rav Amr V'lo Shmuel. If Manami Amr Rav Huna Bar Yehuda Amr Rav Sheshes Amr Rav Yirmiyah Bar Abba Amr Rav. Chela shekarach ruba kshera. Again, the same thing, that the strings, if most of it is the tied up part, those sections that we have tied up, it's still kosher. He has a different version. Amar Rav Huna, Amar Rav Sheshes, Amar Rav Yirmiyah Abba Amar Rav. Chela shekarach ruba kshera. Ba'afilu lekarach, he ends up differently. Ba'afilu lekarach ba'ela cholya achas kshera. And even in the other direction, even if he only made one braid, right? We have a whole, I should have brought like a tzitzis just to hold in front of me so I could point at it. But even if he only has one of those cholias, meaning one of the sections of the tied up part of the string, that's also kosher. So it could be, even if you tie rive of it, which is you're not supposed to do, and even if you only have one of the sections, it's kosher. B'noi tcheles shlish gedil. But the proper way to do it benoi is to make a third of it the tied up part, and 2/3 of it should be the fringes, the strings that are hanging. So that's what we said. Even if it's the other way around, that roiv of it is the tied up part, it's still kosher. But kama shir cholyo. What is the shear of those, what the Gemara refers to as braids, but those different sections, what are the shear of those sections? Tanya Rabbi Yomer, you should do it once and twice and the third time, meaning you make a knot, and there are 7 strings hanging down, you take the 8th string and you tie it, you loop it around it, you should do that at least 3 times. Tana, hapoiches, I think that's what it means. Yeah, you shouldn't do. I think this means shouldn't have less than 7 braids. I think it means the braid refers to that each section. I think that's what it means. You shouldn't have more than 13. I don't know. What does it say over there? What the chulias are? Does it mean the chulias mean how many loops or how many sections with at least 3 loops on it? Yeah.
Even if one braid, only single link in the tchelas, it is valid.
Right. So I think that means the whole braid, that section from one knot to another is called a braid. I think that's what it is.
Braided only if one braided a single link, the tchelas, it is valid.
Yeah.
So in other words, you just have one, it's good?
Yeah, I mean, if you have, the truth is, even if you have just one knot, it's good. It just has to be knot, right? That was the top of the thing. Shamina Kesher Elyon Deraisa, that to have one knot is what you required by Deraisa. Okay, just because sometimes the Gemara will use the same lashon and mean something else. So I'm not 100% sure.
The note says it is proper to make a braid that is subdivided into numerous links.
Yeah.
So it means that
the links, each section which we have different amounts. One is 5 and one is 7, and that's why I was wondering, because it says over here it shouldn't be less than 7. Okay, let's assume that what we're talking about here is the links. You shouldn't have less than 7 and more than 13 sections of the tied part of your tzitzis, of the sections. Opposite the 7 rikiyas. Because that's opposite the 6 different parts of the heavens that are in between the 7 rikiyas. And Taisus explains, Tchelis, it's all coming from Tchelis. Since you include Tchelis is blue, so we want it to be Daima to the Tchelis is to remind us of the Rebbeinu Shalom, by reminding us of the Shemayim. You look at the blue, remind you of the heavens, and you'll think of the Rebbeinu Shalom. So therefore you make it between 7 and 13, because that is the amount of the Rikias.
Can we do Lamaisa less than 7?
Yeah, we do less than 7. I guess we don't have Tchelis, maybe that's why. I don't know.
Taisa says.
Yeah. No, yeah.
Banan the left light.
Anu Noigin Chamisha Ksharim Pirsha Kuntrus Kavitisha Kula Keneg Kol HaMitzvahs. She says Oila. Yeah, so we do 5 for the 5 Chumshei Torah. Yeah, there's a lot of different cheshbonis on this, but it's important to know that it's going Keneged the Tcheles, because the next Tanak Shu Mastel Beloved. When he starts, that means it seems that they used to loop around. They didn't just use one string to loop around all the others. We have just one long string that does all the loops. But then they used to have some tchelis and some lavan. So they would use some of the lavan and some of the tchelis. It would be like mixed in. It would be a nice effect. So
one link would be tchelis.
No, not even one link. Within the link, the strings would be like one white string, then a blue string afterwards.
Together.
Yeah. So maskal beloved, because hakanaf min knaf. Because where does lavan come from? Where do we get the white from? Because we say it has to be, since it's hakanaf, so it tells you the same material or the same color as the baguette, which is white. And kshu Messiah beloved. He should also finish with lavan. Malam Kodesh V'Lemeridin, since the Lavan is the one that you start with, Malam Kodesh V'Lemeridin, says the word, we keep in the Akdamei Krolam in Knaf, Shemamina Chashabu. You see that the Lavan is the more Chashabu one, because the Torah put it first. So therefore you should start with Lavan and end with Lavan. They were going along. This fellow was passing by. He was wearing a baguette. The baguette was all made out of tchelas. And he had on it. There were tzitzis coming down. Ugdila migdal. And the entire tzitzis was all made into a knot. There was nothing left hanging down below the tzitzis, below the knots. That means he had the different chulyas, the different sections, and then it ended. Amarav, Yoi Glima, it's a beautiful baguette. He had no problem with the baguette of Tchelis, Lo Yoi Tchilta, but he didn't have the fringes, he doesn't have the strings, so he didn't do it properly, he didn't do it nicely. Rabba Babachana, Yoi Glima, Yoi Tchilta. He said, no, both of them are good. The glima is good, and it's fine to have just the knots without any string. What's their argument about? The Torah says the gedil, which is a reference to the knotted part, and it says the psil, which is the part, the free hanging strings. They're two separate psukim, right? It says gedil in one pasuk, it says gedil tasalacha, and the other pasuk it says. So it says psil. So it says in two separate psukim. So you have a choice. You have psil or gedil. No, you have to have, in addition to the knotted portion, in addition to the braided portion, you also have the free hanging portion. That which it says gedilim is not to say that you have an option of psil or gedilim. It's coming to tell you the amount of strings. Gedil shnayim, gedilim arba. Gedil is a minimum of 2. You need 2 in order to make some kind of braid. And then it says gedilim lashon rabim. That tells you 4. That's why I say gedil upaslaya misaychay. Make a gedil with its. Rashi says asa gedil midal chutin sheyosab dal chutin bechur hatalis, should place the 4 strings in the hole in the baguette. Then when you'll double them over and tie them together, you'll braid them together, that will make it into 8. Amar Shmuel Mishmei de Levi. Chutei tzemer poitrin b'shal pishtin. If you have strings of tzemer, right, which is classic, a tcheles doesn't mean blue, it means blue wool. So it means the wool that was dyed blue. So you're allowed to have chutei tzemer, and if the beged is pishtin, it's not a problem. Like we said, we pater shatnez in the classic case where you have a beged of pishtin, of linen, and the chutim made out of tzemer. Iboilhu shall pishtin maushi iftu b'shal tzemer. What if it's the other way around? What if you have a beged of tzemer and your tzitzis are made out of linen? Tzemer b'shal pishtin hu depasa. Do we say only that strings, the tzitzis made out of wool, are potter from shatnez with a linen beged? The kivin the tchelis potter, lava nami potter. And it becomes, because the reason it is because the Torah said we make it comes from the Torah says beged shanez, the parsha of shanez come right before tefillin, and then it says gedil tasalecha. And since a tzitzis, the tzitzis are normally made with tchelis, and the Torah says you should make it with tchelis, which is tzitzis of wool. So that will tell you any tzitzis that are made of wool will be potter in a beged made of linen, not just the tchelis, but also the lavan. But the other way around, the Torah wasn't referring to that. The Torah was referring to the classic case that's described with tchelis. But tchelis is the pashanas comes because the strings are tzemer and the beged is linen. Since the Torah says you shouldn't do shanas of tzemer and pishtim together, and then it says immediately after that, gedilim tasalecha, and it says you should make tzitzis, loishna tzemer pishtim, loishna pishtim with tzemer. It's hushra. We don't care which direction it's going, how you have shatnez in your tzitzis. Tashma the Amar Rachva Amar of Yehuda. Chutei tzemer poitrim b'shal pishtim poitrim b'shal tzemer. He says it works both ways. Even if you have strings of linen, it will pater your beged made out of tzemer, even though that's backwards from the standard tzitzis. Chutei tzemer pishtim poitrim b'chol makom v'afilu b'shirayim. And if you have your strings made up of partially wool and partially linen, that will be potter. It will be potter for shatnez. It won't be chayiv and shatnez. The heter of shatnez and tzitzis will apply even there. And even if the beged is made out of silk. Upligader of Nachman, and this is a machlokes, this is Shver and Rav Nachman, or it's disagreeing with Rav Nachman. Rav Nachman has shirayim p'turim minat tzitzis. He says silk is potter from tzitzis. So you can't have a heter of shatnez unless you're being mekayim the mitzvah of tzitzis. If you say that there's no requirement of attaching tzitzis to your silk beged, so then you can't attach a combination of wool and linen tzitzis because you're wearing something that is not that's shatnez, and you're not being mekayim the mitzvah of tzitzis. So this is not like Rav Nachman, because we said you could attach wool and linen tzitzis to any beged, even if silk. Esrei Rav Rav Nachman, Rav asked Rav Nachman, is it true what you're saying that shirayim are not mechayiv and tzitzis, hashirayim v'aklach v'asrik, and these are different forms of silk begadim. Kulon chayavim b'tzitzis, kulon chayavim b'tzitzis, they're all mechayiv and tzitzis. Rav Nachman said they're potter from tzitzis, and for them midirabanan. Now that which it says in the Bryce over there that they're chayiv and tzitzis, it's only midirabanan. If it's true that it's only saying it midirabanan, it says that on all of them, meaning whichever version of a silk beged, they'll be potter with tzemer and pishtim, with tzitzis of tzemer and pishtim. If you'll say it's deraisa, not like Rav Nachman, that silk is mechuyev deraisa, that's why you can do tzemer and pishtim together, because it's going to be potter from Klein. How could you be potter that's shatnez if according to Rav Nachman, shirai, silk begadim are only mechuyev in tzitzis derabanan? There's no heter of shatnez, which is issa deraisa, when you be mekayim a mitzvah derabanan. So Gemara, iamret derabanan heichi mishnabu Klein. So Rav Nachman would say, no. When it says Tamru Pishtim, Einachanami silk is only the Rabbanon. Is saying it says you can make a tzitzis made out of wool and linen. It doesn't mean wool and linen, it means wool or linen. You can't have, according to Rav Nachman, the Bryce is not saying you can make tzitzis of a combination of wool and linen. It's saying you can do either of wool or of linen, either one is fine. This is only Mechuyev de Rabbanon, but you can't do, and therefore you can't do Tzemer and Pishtim together, but you can do them separately.
So how did you learn that passage that allows you to do shatnez with tzitzis?
Oh, we learned that from the juxtaposition. The Torah says Gedilim Tasalacha, and it's right next to Beged Shatnez, the pasuk about Shatnez.
He just doesn't learn that limit.
So no, everyone agrees to that limit. It says L'shilba Shatnez, but Rav Nachman has a problem, right? Because how could you say if you hold that Shirayim are not Mechuyev in Tzitzis Deraisa? How could the Brisa say that you could attach a mixture of Tzemer and Pishtim together, even though the Torah was matter it by Tzitzis, it's only a Tzitzis Deraisa. And according to him, a silk beged is not Mechuyev in Tzitzis Deraisa. So then you should revert back to the general rule that Shatnez is also. Even though the Rabbanan said it's Tzitzis, but that can't be matter and Issa Deraisa. The heter of Shatnez is only if you're doing a Deraisa Tzitzis, not a Rabbanan Tzitzis.
But it's still the Rabbanan Isser of silk and wool.
So there's no Rabbanan Isser. There's a Deraisa Isser of wool and linen. That's the only Isser. That's Shatnez, which is Potter b'makom tzitzis. When you're doing tzitzis, when you're mekayim tzitzis deraisa, it's allowed. But the Rav Nachman holds, so that's one. Then we have a machlekes whether a silk beged requires tzitzis mideraisa. Rav says it does. Rav Nachman says it doesn't. So you have a problem that the Brisa says a silk beged can have a wool and linen. It can have wool and linen strings. How could you have wool and linen strings? Wool and linen together is shatnez, and you're only in a fake tzitzis. It's only the Rabbanan tzitzis. It's not a deraisa tzitzis. So you should have the general rule that shatnez is also. There's no heter of shatnez on the Rabbanan. So Nachum says it never meant to say mix together Tzemer and Pishtin tzitzis. It means each individually can be attached to your silk. But in a chanami, you can't have wool and linen tzitzis on a silk beged.
I mean like one set of strings, wool, the other set of strings.
No, within one set of strings.
Within one set.
Yeah.
So if you tie it together, it's not a problem?
It would be, except that you're allowed to do it on a regular tzitzis. It's okay. Because it's generally, but if you have silk tzitzis, you can't do it together because we're saying that you can't do it together.
You can't do it together.
Right, that's what he says. That's his final answer. It means Yitaka can't do them together. It's either one, either Tzemer or Pishtim. Hachanam Mistavi, Tani Sefer, Hein b'minan poitrin, shaloi b'minan einin poitrin. We said in the different types of silk, if you do the tzitzis out of the same material as the beged, the pater, and if not the same material, it's not pater. So if you'll say that silk is only mechuyev derabanan haydim mifter b'minan, that's how we're allowed to make the tzitzis out of silk. Aliyam deraisa tzemer pishim hu de pater. If it's the Raisa, Tzemer Pishtim, we just said Tzemer Pishtim could be used for the strings. We don't know other things. So Rabba says it's not just Tzemer Pishtim that could be used as the strings. The Rabba Rami Ksiv Hakonaf Min Knaf. The Torah says you should make the tzitzis al tzitzis Hakonaf Psiltecheles. So we say that the tzitzis should be of the same material as the baged, uksev tzamro pishtim. But we also say, legabi leisil b'shan tzamro pishtim yachtav. Haketza tzamro pishtim poitrim be'b'mina and bein shaloi b'mina. Samro Pishtin a pater with it, which is an adjoining pasuk. Samro Pishtin pater, whether it's with their own, whether you have a beged of tzemer or a beged of pishtim or a beged of any other material, they're going to pater. They're going to be used. They're going to be fulfill the mitzvah of tzitzis. Shamin b'mina poitrin shalei b'mina ain't poitrin. But other begadim, other types of materials, they only pater their own material. So if you have a silk beged and silk tzitzis, that would pater. You could put your tzemer or your pishtim on a beged of silk or whatever. Well, not like Rav Nachman. According to Rav Nachman, I'm sorry. Yeah, according to not like Rav Nachman who says that.
Rava holds that you can only use silk on silk.
Yeah, no, he's saying that it's a chiddush, right? Silk cannot be the tzitzis for a tzemer or pishtim beged. It could only be.
So in other words, B'mina Poitrin means they both have to be the same material, basically.
Yeah, that means let's say you could put semer on your pishtim beged, and you could put pishtim on your tzemer beged. Though they have a wider range that they can apply to, but other materials, it's only for the same material that they could be yaitza. Yeah, you learn that from Hakanaf Minkna. So in any case, but now we don't have a rioter of Nachman. So where does Rav Nachman get his din from? That shirayim are mechoyev ben tzitzis, that silk is mechoyev ben tzitzis. Tan bei Rabbi Shmuel, tan bei Rabbi Shmuel. Hayel v'nemer begadim b'tayr stam. Palachos b'achem and tzemer pishtim. I've called tzemer pishtim. No, I'm sorry. Rav Nachman, I keep. This is why I'm getting myself confused. Nachman said that silk is potter from tzitzis, and everyone said it's mut. So where does Nachman get it from? Because we weren't able to prove his point from the fact that we said he was trying to say how can he mistavra and he had rayas, but we don't have a source. Where does he get it from? That shirayim are potter from tzitzis. So we say you get from Tana Rabbi Shmuel. Tana Rabbi Shmuel.
Nachman holds that silk begadim did not only midrabanan tzitzis.
Right. It's only midrabanan. The brisa that said it is only midrabanan, and the Torah does not ruk. It's not midraisa mechlev. So where does it come from? It says hayel v'nemer begadim b'Torah stam. The Torah says stam begadim many times. So parlucha kasa b'echad me'em tzeru pishtim, and the Rashi explains that it says tzeru pishtim by mitzayra. It says a beged tzeru pishtim. I've called tzemer pishtim. When the Torah says a beged, it's referring to tzemer pishtim. So when it says over here, tzitzis al kafe v'gdeyim, that means tzemer pishtim. But a beged of something else, like silk, is not included. Rabbi v'hai Berei Bishmal. So this Berei Bishmal, which is a source for Rav Nachman, is not mafkam either Berei Bishmal. We have a different price from Rabbi Shmuel. The Berei Bishmal beged ain't liela beged semer. Beged is only a reference to beged semer. Now rabbit semer gemalim. It's the camel hair, but semer arnovim, or rabbit hair, benutza shalizim, or goat hair, v'klach v'asrikim v'ashirayim, or the different types of silk. Minayat ha'malaymer oy bebeged. The pasuk says, oy bebeged, ez oy beged oy or sok. That tells you even additional begadim, not just the normal beged of tzemer pishtim, but even additional begadim.
Okay.
It's a riboy. I guess it's a klal uprat. Torah says beged in one place. It says, I guess we're going like it's a klal uprat to klal. Right? We say beged, then we say tzemer pishtim is the prat, and then we say at the end oy beged to be marba anything that's similar to it, any beged. I guess it's something that must be excluded, but I don't know. Or it doesn't say it directly what it is. Okay, we'll stop over here. I hope there's a minion over there. It was very quiet.
Yes, there.
Thanks. Have a great day.
Take care.